Welcome to Senior Living Visionaries, a podcast for senior living leaders who are looking to stay ahead of the curve in the industry. On this show, we feature leaders and innovators in senior living who are pushing the boundaries and creating new, effective services and solutions. And now, let's settle in as host Jennifer Drago connects us with today's guests.
Do you feel like your board meetings are a waste of time or a powerful engine for change? Hi, I'm Jennifer Drago, and today on Senior Living Visionaries, we're going to talk about a governance best practice to increase your board engagement, and that is having effective board meetings. We're going to talk about some strategies to really drive change in your board meetings. And if you implement any of these techniques, I am certain that you're going to see a huge jump in the engagement of your board, but also the strategic feeling of those board meetings. You're going to feel like you are really having an impact when you host a board meeting. Thanks for being a part of Senior Living Visionaries today. On this podcast, we showcase leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of senior living, but we also focus a lot on best practices and governance because governance is so important to an organization's competitive advantage. So some of the things we're going to talk about today as best practices are developing cohesive and clear agendas, which is a best practice, a research-backed best practice to make sure that we're time efficient and that we promote the productive discussion that we need, as well as the decisions where those are needed. We want to make sure during those board meetings that we allocate a specific and intentional time for strategic discussions. So we're going to talk about generative discussions and what those are. We want to utilize digital tools and metrics and dashboards wherever we can to enhance our data visualization and our analytics, because again, in a short time, we need to share with our board what we're doing well, where we have opportunities for improvement. They need to be able to conceptualize that and understand it, even if they're not data savvy or maybe they don't have a financial background. They need to be able to analyze those metrics in a matter of minutes so that they can utilize that in their decision making and the strategic direction that they're giving us. And then we also, as a best practice, want to make sure that we're regularly evaluating our board performance. So those are all some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So first, let's talk about the agenda. One of the things that I really like in today's environment with nonprofits is flipping the agenda. So what do we usually start our agendas off with? Well, we usually call the meeting to order. We might take a roll call or just make sure we understand who's there. We're probably going to look at the minutes of the prior meeting first. Then after that, we're going to look at the financials. We might have some reporting from committees. And so what tends to fall out or end up toward the bottom of the agenda is the new business, the strategic business, the important business, because we put all the minutia up front or the things that are maybe more regular and rote. If we flip the script, we should start the meeting actually with our strategic topics. And so one of the things that we can do at the very top of the meeting is take a look at our annual goals and how we're doing according to our timelines that we set, the goals, the dashboard. Do we have a strategic dashboard that lists our goals and the status of each? That's a great way to start the agenda and to know that we're really focused on strategy and moving the organization forward. Also, if there's any decisions related to expansion or new business opportunities or partnership opportunities, those things can all happen in the first half of the agenda. So let's try to put our strategic stuff first. Then after that, a great thing to put on your agenda, and I advise you to do this at least every other board meeting, but best practice would be to do it every board meeting, generative discussion. So this is an open-ended time for discussion around one singular focus. And generally, the board chair will pose a question to the board members that they can review in advance and come prepared with some thoughts to share around that topic. And the topics are things that aren't always having to do with current business and current operations, but looking forward. So they're forward thinking. They might be out of the box type questions, such as what organizations might make for great strategic partners. Are there any organizations in our service area that we should consider merging with or taking over? If we had to design our products or services from scratch today, what do you think we would design? What might be a service or a program that we can serve our clientele and have the mission impact that we want? We might design it a little bit different today than we would in the past. So those are some examples of some generative questions that you can pose. And we put aside about 15 to 20 minutes for these discussions. And they're not intended to have an outcome at that meeting, but they're intended to spark the discussion and to maybe start the evaluation of some key things. Not always do they have to have an outcome. So don't have an expectation of that. But one expectation that you should have, I think, is that you have board members who review the question ahead of time, come prepared with some thoughts around that question, and then everybody around the table gives input and shares what their thoughts are on the question. So that's a great way to get everyone involved, to be forward thinking, and to set aside time to really, again, think outside the box. And then after the generative discussion, that's when you can put in your operational reporting. So you can review your minutes, you can review your financials. The committee reports can be in there. Great place for a consent agenda. If you use a consent agenda where you're voting on different reports and minutes all at once, things that you review ahead of time, but you don't necessarily need to take the time doing separate votes on. Also in that operational section, you might want to share your operational dashboards and metrics and your CEO report. So all the operational rote things, still important, but they come at the end of the meeting, and you're giving the beginning of the meeting time for your strategic focus, your generative discussions, and your board members are going to be better prepared to give you energy at the beginning of the meeting for those important discussions. So one of the things that I want to caution you when you have board meetings is to make sure that you're not doing too much reporting. Your board members should not be sitting there listening to report after report. And certainly, somebody said once, if you read your agenda and you see report, that's not really a board meeting. Again, those things can go in the operational section. Reports can generally be voted on in total, in some condensed fashion, but you don't want to spend the entire board meeting speaking at the board members. You want the board members to be involved in that discussion. So instead, you should have about 1/3 of your materials be presentation materials and about 2/3 discussion. Prioritize decision-making over information sharing is the key here. Another thing that you can do is make sure that the board members, first of all, that you have an expectation that board members are going to come prepared to the meeting, that they are going to have reviewed the materials. And let's make it easy for our board members to do that. So some organizations use a board portal that they pay for through Board Source or Board Effect. Those are great tools. They can also be a little pricey for smaller nonprofits. So you can certainly use a Google Drive, or you can simply email the agenda packets out. But one thing I would absolutely do is combine all your materials into one packet. So I worked with a board recently, and I asked them to share with me the materials from their prior board meetings for 2 months. And I got 2 emails that each had about 20 documents attached. Now, if I was a board member attending one of those meetings, I would have to keep my agenda open and then be trying to decipher the different document names to know what order each one goes through. I'd have to open up each document individually to be able to review it. And certainly during the board meeting, if I wanted to follow along, it's just very clunky. So another thing that you can do, especially if you have virtual meetings or hybrid board meetings, or even if you don't, and you want your board members to come adequately prepared, put all those together, condense them into one PDF so the folks can just review them. Now, if you have a board portal, the board portal will take care of that for you. But let's make it easy for our board members to come prepared to the board meetings. A best practice for ensuring that your meetings are going well and that they are productive and strategic as you want is to conduct board meeting assessments. So as the board chair, one of the best practices that a board chair can do is at the end of each meeting, ask some pointed questions or do a quick survey. Some of the questions might be, was the meeting today a good use of your time? In what ways in what ways would you like to see them improved? Another thing they can ask are, what would you like to start, stop, or continue? Or again, we can do a quick survey that they fill out, but I wouldn't send it to folks after the fact. I think if we can do it in the room, and specifically if we ask for feedback, we want to go around and hear from every single person if you have a question of the day that you want to ask. But ultimately, the question should be trying to identify opportunities to improve the way that you run the board meetings. And it's great feedback for your chair on how they can do things better and also keep the meetings moving forward and moving in the right direction. So another thing that I want to share is that I worked with an organization that used to have 4-hour board meetings. And I'm not kidding, 4-hour board meetings and half days. And they were starting to bleed into the second half of the day until one of our board chairs got really strategic about how we manage the board meetings themselves and all the materials. We started to implement consent agendas, and we started to really streamline the reporting. So during those 4-hour long board meetings, the staff would parade in front of the board with report after report after report. And again, they're many times summarizing what's on a slide or in a report, repeating what's in a report. There's nothing more frustrating as a board member than to have somebody read to you something that you've already read yourself. So take into account how valuable your board members' time is and make sure that you're doing the best that you can to maximize that time. And again, go back to that rule of 1/3 presentation, 2/3 discussion. So those are some of the key strategies to have great board meetings. Again, I want to just remind you that we want to have clear and cohesive agendas. We want to actually consider flipping the script on agendas. I think it's a great practice to put your strategic work at the top of the agenda. Utilize generative discussions at all or most of your meetings, about 15 to 20 minutes of open-ended discussion around a specific question where everyone participates, and then put your operating items at the end of the agenda. Make sure we utilize the tools at our disposal to be able to organize our board materials so that board members can access them during the board meetings, but even more importantly, so that they can prepare effectively for the board meetings. And that can be organizing them on a board portal, but even if they're on a Google Drive, make sure that they're combined into one cohesive PDF so that everything can be read in one sitting and without having to figure out what document is being referred to. And then regularly evaluate your board performance. Do that through regular board meeting assessments, a simple question or two at the end of a board meeting where we go around the table. We take about 2 minutes in total and we ask how the board meeting went. Was it a good use of our time? How could we be more efficient? Ask a different question each time and see what answers you get and what you learn from that process. Now, the other thing that I want to discuss around board meetings is the idea of in-person meetings versus online meetings versus hybrid meetings. And I've seen boards recently do all of the above and sometimes toggle between the different types of meetings. And that is fine to do. I think we should recognize that post-COVID, hybrid meetings and virtual technology is here to stay. It's not going to go away anytime soon. So we need to figure out how we want to harness the pros of using that technology and how we want to continue to drive board engagement by supplementing virtual meetings and hybrid meetings with other things to help keep that engagement. So I won't go through all the pros and cons of each because I know that you know why we do hybrid meetings. Certainly, it's so much more convenient for those who sometimes have transportation challenges, who live in a different geography, who are traveling or are snowbirds. Having the virtual meeting option is a great convenience for many. Some boards that I've been on actually restrict the number of meetings that you can attend virtually. So, for example, I have a huge headache this morning, so I'm not going to drive into the board meeting, but I'm going to be on camera and participate that way. But I can only do that twice a year. Twice in a board year am I permitted to participate virtually because I really want to drive the in-person engagement. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is that you toggle back and forth between in-person board meetings and online or virtual board meetings. The reason that you want to do that is when you're in person, the discussion is different, but also the trust level, the trust and the familiarity that you can gain and share with other board members actually leads to better conversation, better constructive dialogue, especially around challenging issues. And it builds trust so that you can have conflict and it can be safe. So remember, conflict in a board meeting is not bad. We want to have constructive conflict or constructive dialogue where we can talk about both sides of an issue and come to some kind of agreement that or decision that when we walk out of the board meeting, we're all in alignment around that decision. So you need trust to be able to do that. In order to get trust, I think it's very important that at least some of the time you're getting together in person. Another thing that you can do is have some social engagements in person to supplement your online virtual meetings or hybrid meetings. And then one other word about hybrid board meetings is that I would have some meeting expectations around hybrid board meetings, and I would build these right into your board roles and responsibilities. So for example, if it's that meeting where I have a huge headache and I've decided to not drive an hour into the downtown area to attend the board meeting, and I'm going to be on camera, I have to have my camera on. And I'm expected to participate as much as I would if I was in the room. I can't tell you how many boards, and again, I work with a lot of boards, but I generally try to interview all the board members before I go into a board retreat situation, so I can understand what the issues are going in. And I can't tell you how many times I have a board member jump on a Zoom call without their camera on, and then I'll ask him, can you put your camera on? Because I really like to engage with folks on Zoom. And they say, I don't know how to, or, oh, my camera isn't working today. And so I always think to myself, okay, if you can't even open your camera for a Zoom with me, what does your board participation look like? So really need to set some norms and expectations around how this technology is used in your board meetings, what your expectations are of board members that use that type of technology. One final thing that I will say about having virtual technology is, as a board chair, if I'm chairing the meeting, I need to ask for participation from the virtual members. So if I have a hybrid mix of in-person members and those online, I need to take time to stop and ask the online folks for their input, for their feedback specifically, so that they don't feel left out of the conversation. All right, well, that is our episode for today. I want to encourage you to reach out and grab a checklist that we have, and it's around generative board discussions. So why do we have them? But more importantly, it gives you 20 starter questions that your board can use. It's specifically designed for nonprofit boards to generate generative discussion questions on your agenda. So this will be a great starting point for you to start using generative discussion if you're not doing so already in your board meetings. I want to thank you for listening today and learning more about effective board meetings. And again, the reason this is important is the number one driver of board engagement is how efficient, effective, and impactful your board meetings are. If your board members are coming to meetings and feeling like they're making an impact and able to participate and they're engaging meetings, they are going to stay on your board and be great contributors to your organization. So I encourage you to really take a look at your board meeting structure and the efficiency, how well they're working, and try to make improvements where needed. Thanks so much for listening today. You've been listening to Senior Living Visionaries. You can always subscribe at seniorlivingvisionaries.com to be notified when new episodes come out. Also, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. So wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We're also on YouTube if you prefer the video format. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Senior Living Visionaries podcast and radio show, where we showcase the leaders and innovators in the industry who are pushing the boundaries and setting the stage for the future in senior living and services. Join us next time as we share the bold ideas and breakthroughs of the industry's most forward-thinking leaders here on Senior Living Visionaries.